Hey guys, how you going? My name is Dom, and in this video we're going to look at how to create this tab setup using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So obviously you all know how this works. If I was to click on one of these tabs here, it changes the content in the right side. So this is what we're going to create in this video, and this is all done using pure HTML, CSS and JavaScript. There is no need for any sort of library such as jQuery to achieve something like this. So it's all done in pure JavaScript. So let's go inside this empty document right here and begin from scratch. Okay, so let's go inside Visual Studio Code here, and we have here just this blank template file with, of course, here included also a master CSS file, which is also blank. Okay, so let's go inside the HTML and begin on the HTML structure. So essentially we're going to have a few levels of elements here. So we have back on the final result, we have here the whole container of this tabbed panel or tabbed component. We have the sidebar, we have the content, and we have the actual tab buttons. So those 3 or 4 things we need to, of course, represent in HTML. So back inside here, let's begin, of course, with the whole container for the tabbed component. So let's go below the h1 tag and create a new div with a class of tabs. So that right there is obviously our container. Let's create now the sidebar, so we can make a new div with a class of tabs and 2 underscores and call this sidebar. So I'm just using a CSS naming convention called BEM, block element modifier, but you can of course name whatever you like for these, but obviously I'm going to be using this sort of layout or naming convention for this video. So tab sidebar as my class name. Inside here we're going to of course have those 3 tabs, so we can make new buttons for these. So a button with a class of tabs underscore underscore button. Okay. Inside here we can say tab number 1 and do the same thing for 2 more tabs just like that. So I can just save this and refresh, and we currently have this right here. Okay, so back inside here, for each one of these tabs we need to tell it which panel or which content to open up. So for example, obviously tab 1 is for tab 1 and so on. So inside the button, I'm just going to add a new attribute called data-for-tab, then equals 1. So this is a custom data element, or sorry, custom data attribute, which just says this button right here is for tab 1. That's all it means. It's like a little flag. It's a bit of data stored against the button. Okay. Inside the JavaScript, we're basically going to read this attribute for each one of these buttons and determine from there which tab to actually open up. So this is for tab number 1, and we can do the same thing for these 2 down here. And of course change these to be 2 and 3. So pretty straightforward so far. Alright, we can now make each one of those individual content panels or divs. So back inside the demonstration or the final product, each one of these different panels or content is a separate div. So we can see here we have 1, 2, 3. So all those 3 are rendered and loaded when the page loads up, but we are hiding them with the display none down here. So we have to actually specify each one of these 3 content divs on page load. So back inside here, we can do that right now. So we can create one of them. This will have a class of tabs content, and here we're basically going to map this data for tab to this one here. So we can say data dash tab equals 1. This is tab 1. So now this data attribute is linked to this data attribute right here by the value of 1. Alright, and inside here we can add just some dummy data. So we can say tab number 1, and I'll just copy and paste some of the original paragraphs from the demonstration. I'll format that and basically do the same thing for 2 more tabs. So I'll copy this and paste it twice more. Alright, we have tab number 2 and some more sample content. and tab number 3, and a different paragraph, of course. Alright, cool. And of course, got to change this data tab to be 3 and 2. So obviously, if you are loading this page from your server side, you may want to do some sort of looping, or you want to output this data in a way that this 1, 2, and 3 are going to match up with that right there. If you're not using any server-side stuff, then of course just make sure these things match. Simple as that. Okay. I can save this and refresh, and we have here our final result for the HTML. So now let's add some CSS to, of course, make it look like this. Alright, so inside the master CSS file, we can begin on the tabs container. So the container class is called tabs. Okay, we're going to give it a border of 1px solid and a nice light gray, and we're going to display it as a flex box. That way we can of course have the nicely aligned or positioned sidebar and content. Okay, for the tabs sidebar, we can give it a fixed width of 125 pixels. Okay, I think it's a nice number to use. We're going to say flex shrink as being 0. That way the content inside the actual panel content, so all your paragraphs, aren't going to push and make the sidebar smaller. So that will ensure that the sidebar is always 125px. The background for this can be a medium gray, so of course triple C's here. Okay, I'll save this and refresh, and we have this result right here. So obviously getting there. We can see what the flex has done. Of course, we have 125 here, and we have the rest of the content filled up, or the rest of the width filled up by each one of these content. Okay, so of course, once you have only one displaying at once, it'll take up the entire width of the container. Alright, so back inside here, let's work on the tabs button. We can display each button as a block. Give it some padding. We can have no background, that way it inherits or has the background of the sidebar. You know what? Let's actually make it triple E's. So background as a light grey. A border of none. A width of 100%. I do not believe that when you're using display block on a button element, the width will be increased to 100%. You have to set it here manually for the button elements. An outline of none and a cursor of pointer. I can save this and refresh, and we get this right here. Okay, back inside here, we're going to specify what happens when a button gets clicked on. So basically when you hold down or you're halfway through your click, that's going to be the tabs button, an active pseudo class, a background of a slightly darker grey as the background for the default. And for every button that is not the last one, so we can say tabs button not last child, or last of type, probably better. We can say border bottom 1px solid and the same border as the container. So now every button that's not the last one is going to have a border. So I can save this and refresh, and we get our border appearing there for each one. And you know what? I think the border did apply to this one. I'll just confirm that if I go inside here and change this to something like, let's just do white actually. There you go. So no border for the last button. Okay, cool. So back inside here, we can of course go down here and say tabs button. Now here we're going to add a CSS class that's basically like a flag to say a button is active. So I'm going to say -- active here, and here we're going to specify the CSS for when the tab is active. So this bold background and the green border. So yeah, the green right border. Alright, so back inside here, let's add those styles to this active class. So of course, when you click on the button, it's going to apply this class to the button element, and of course that will add those styles right here. So I'm going to say font weight as being bold, border right as being 2px solid, and using the dcode green color, and a background of once again that a bit darker gray. And I'm also going to add this class just for demonstration onto one of these buttons. So I'm going to say class tabs button active right there. So the first one should now get those active styles. Refresh, we get that right there. Perfect. Okay. Let's now work on the tabs content. So back down here, and say tabs content, padding of 15px, a font size of 0.8 rem. The font is a bit big here, so I'm going to make it 80% of the root size, which I believe is 16px. 15px. No, 16px. So yeah, we'll make that 80% of the root element size. And we can say display none by default. I can save this, refresh, and now we get no tabs being displayed. Of course, we're going to do a similar thing with the tabs where, or the tab content, where you're going to have an active class to make that actually active. So back inside here, let's say tabs content, and then dash active. We can set this to display block. Save this and go back inside here and add, for demonstration, tabs content dash active to the first one. Save this and refresh, and we get here only one being displayed. So basically the structure and the CSS is now ready. I'm just going to make sure that this margin isn't too big up here. So I'm just going to go back inside here and say, I'm going to say for the first child, or the first element inside the tabs content, we're going to give a margin top of 0. So margin top of 0, and now save this, refresh, and now we get much less space between the top and the first element. Alright, so all the CSS and HTML is now done. We can now write some pretty minimal JavaScript to, of course, get this working dynamically. So the way the JS is going to work is that you can basically add any amount of tabs or any amount of tab containers to your website, and the JavaScript will work in a way that it works for every single element you have. So you can add multiple tab containers, it's all going to work just fine. Alright, so I'll demonstrate that after as well, but for now, let's go inside the JavaScript and of course start working on that. So we're going to define a function called setup tabs, and that's going to of course initiate all of the code. So we're going to say function setup tabs. Inside here, what we're going to do first is we're basically just going to say for each button, okay, we're going to fire off an event listener, or a function when they click the button, okay, and that function is going to do all the work to display the content for whichever tab you selected. So inside here, we're going to say document.query selector all. So we're going to select every element with a class of tabs button. In this case, it's going to be these three right here. So for each one of those buttons, alright, we're going to say button.add event listener. We're going to listen for the click events, and when they get clicked on, we're going to do this inside here. So this is basically the heart of this whole functionality. So once you click on one of these buttons, you need 4 things, okay? You need the sidebar, the container, the tab number, so 1, 2, or 3, and the tab panel or content to activate, okay? So let's define 4 constants down here to represent each one of those 4 things. So let's make a new constant called sidebar equal to button.parent element. So parent element is going to take you up. So you start at the button, okay? Parent goes to the next one, sidebar. Okay, so sidebar is going to be, of course, the sidebar. Alright, make a new one for tabs container. Now, very similarly, the tabs container is going to be the parent of the sidebar. So we can say sidebar.parent element. And now, of course, got the sidebar. The parent is tabs. Okay. Make a new constant called tabs number equal to button.dataset.forTab. So here, dataset refers to any attributes that start with data dash, and then forTab means for tab. So basically JavaScript is going to convert your, I believe it's called dash case or snake case format, so for dash tab, into camel case for capital T tab. So for tab here refers to the value of 2 right there. So tab number equals 2. Alright. Now we can get the actual tab content to activate. So of course, we have 2, it's right here, so we're going to get the panel with data tab equals and then 2 or whatever it might be. So down here, we can say const tab to activate is equal to tabs container, so this one right here. Then we can say query selector, we can pass in here tabs content with data tab equal to, and inside here we can pass in the tab number. So it's getting a bit hard to work with and view here, but basically we're saying select the tabs content element with data tab equal to whatever you got from tab number here. So of course, if you click on tab number 3, it's going to get tab number 3. Then it's going to say, yep, get me the tab content with data tab 3, which of course is this one right here. Alright, so pretty straightforward. So now we're going to simply console.log the sidebar and all of these 4 things just to see what's actually happening and make sure everything actually works. Okay, so put all those things inside here, save this and refresh. Now we're going to click on a button inside the console. We get nothing. You know why? Because I didn't actually run this function. So let's go back inside here and say document.addEventListener. Once all of the DOM content has loaded, so all of your HTML has been read by the browser, we can say setup tabs and actually call that function. Alright, so the page is loaded. Let's call the setup tabs function. I can save this, refresh, and now click on the first tab, and we still get nothing. I'm a bit surprised. Let's go back inside here and actually, of course, so we're going to make this tabs button. Alright, that's a bad mistake. Let's save this and refresh. Click on this one right here. Now we get all of the elements inside the sidebar or the console. So we get here the sidebar, we get the whole container, we get tab number 1, and we get the content for tab number 1. If I was to click on number 3, we get the same thing, but 3 here and 3 there. Alright, so everything is set up and is ready for us to use. So the next few steps involve basically just setting the buttons to be inactive and then set your active one and do the same thing for the content. So down here, we're going to say sidebar.query selector all. We're going to select all of the buttons inside the sidebar, and for each one of those buttons, okay, we're going to say button.classList.remove. We're going to remove the tabs button -- active class. So now, of course, it's basically going to reset so all of the buttons have no active state. All right. And then from there, we're going to, of course, set our selected or clicked on button to have that class. All right. We can do the same thing for the tabs or the tab content. So I'm going to copy this, go down here, make this tabs container, and we're going to say for each tabs content inside the tabs container, we can just call this tab and call this tab. We're going to remove the tabs content -- active class. All right. So now I can just save this and refresh. We can actually test this part. So now we have tab 1 selected. If I was to click on tab 1 again, it gets deselected. And the same thing works, of course, for tab 2 or 3. So now we're in this state right here. Now we can simply just say for whatever tab I clicked on, make this active and make that active. Back inside here, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to say button.classList.add, and then tabs button -- active, of course. And of course, do the same thing for the tab. So tab.classList.add. Okay, I can save this, refresh the browser, and we get this. Click on this, boom, it doesn't work. Let's go back inside here, sorry. That was meant to be tabs to activate, or tab to activate .classList. Let's try it again, save and refresh. Click this, boom, it all works perfectly fine. So it's working great. Now, what happens when you want to choose which element to actually, or which tab to load by default? Well, it's probably going to be the first one, but you don't want to have to specify that inside the HTML. So you want to try and avoid having this active loaded by default. So let's make them all inactive when the page loads up. And then go inside the JavaScript. Let's go inside here and say document.querySelectorAll. We're going to select every single tabs container. So .tabs, for each. So for each tabs container on the page, we're basically just going to say select the first tab. So we'll say tabs container .querySelector, and we can say tabs sidebar .tabs button. Then .click. So here we're just saying get the first tabs button, so the first button inside the sidebar for each tab container, and then click on it. And by clicking on it, it's going to of course trigger this event right here and do all of the stuff. I can save this and refresh, get this here. Alright, so now of course it loads this by default. Alright, and that right there is how you can create tabs with pure HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.